All right, let's find some equations from graphs. So if I give you a graph of an equation, like hypothetically this one, can you find the equation of this graph? And the answer is yes, you will be able to. So maybe not yet. And the answer for how you do that is basically you work backwards from what we did before. You're going to find the amplitude, period, the phase shift, the midline, and then use that to put it in standard general form. A sine of bx minus c plus d, right? Or cosine. I don't want to write the same thing twice, so I'm just saying sine, but we can also use cosine functions as well. And remember that sine of x, we can think about that as starting at the midline, and it goes up. Cosine of x starts at the top, and it goes down. So these are going to be kind of useful rules of thumb for us to think about, right? So what I mean by that, sine starts in the middle. That's what I mean. Cosine starts at the top. That's what I mean. All right, so let's combine all this to solve problems. So we're going to start with example 8. We have very high numbers. No, we're going to start with example 6. That's a little bit better. It says find an equation for the cosine graph. So sometimes they'll specify here, right? They're specifying that they want you to find it specifically for cosine. So we're going to start by saying, okay, y equals a times cosine of bx minus c plus d. Please tell me I used minus back here. Great, I did it. Good job. So let's look at this. We're just going to have to find everything we need. Amplitude, period, phase shift, midline. Let's start with the midline here. I love starting with the midline. You can start with anything, honestly. You can start with the midline here. The midline is where the middle is. So 1 is the maximum, 0 is the minimum. The midline should be right in that middle. The midline should be y equals positive 1/2. Okay, so midline. Y equals positive 1/2. That immediately tells us what d is. D is that value. Okay, our answer on the bottom, plus a 1/2. We know that much. We also can look at the period, the amplitude. Doesn't matter what order you do things in. Well, let's look at the amplitude, right? If we're starting in the middle, the amplitude is how much above the middle do we go and how much below the middle do we go. So from the middle, we go up 1/2 or we go down 1/2. The amplitude is 1/2. We didn't mention this before, but another way of finding the amplitude, right, is it's always half the distance between the maximum and the minimum. That's another way of finding the amplitude. So here the maximum is 1 and the minimum is 0. So that distance is positive 1. What's half that distance? 1/2. All right, we have to also look at period and phase shift, and these ones are more complicated. B relates to the period, but it's not the same. First, let's go to the graph and find the period. How long does it take till it repeats? So we start at the bottom, and then we're at the bottom again 2 pi later. Oh, this is nice. The period is 2 pi, right? Look at the distance between the tops. Start at, if we go pi, we're at the top again, 3 pi. That's 2 pi later. So this is convenient. The period is 2 pi. So what does that say about b? Because that does not mean b is 2 pi. The period is 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. So watch out, right? B is not 2 pi. So if the period is 2 pi, replace it. Period is 2 pi. Let's just assume b is positive here. You solve this equation by multiplying both sides by b. And it cancels on the right. And we're left with b times 2 pi equals 2 pi. Divide both sides by 2 pi and you'll get that b equals 1. Right? The period of a normal cosine function is 2 pi. So our b value, our coefficient, is 1. Amplitude is 1/2. Cosine b value is 1, so we'll just write x here. We still don't know the phase shift. So there's 2 ways of doing phase shift here. Actually, there's a million ways, literally infinitely many ways of doing phase shift, but there's 2 ways that I think makes the most sense. Cosine starts at the top. This graph is starting at the bottom. So you have 2 ways of dealing with that fact. You can say that we shifted it, right? This point up here should have been right here. We shifted it pi units to the right. You could say a phase shift of pi. Or you could say we got a reflection. So you have 2 options here, right? We're starting at the bottom, so could just make a negative. Could make a negative because we're starting at the bottom. Or use a phase shift. The phase shift is pi units to the right. Because cosine should start up here. Whoa, I did not want to zoom in like that. Cosine should start up here, but we're actually over here. We got moved from here to here, that we got moved pi units to the right. So to the right, x minus c over b. So pi is equal to c over b. And b is 1. So c is the same thing as pi, since b is 1. So c x minus pi like so is our answer. But again, there's a lot of answers, but another one you could have done was negative 1/2 cosine of x plus 1/2 as well. Let's look at these answers and see whether they're right. So if I graph, okay, so I already graphed the negative 1/2 cosine of positive 1/2. Oh, don't look at this. This is a spoiler. No. All right, hopefully you're not spoiling anything for yourself. Let's graph our other answer and see if we're also correct. Y equals positive 1/2 cosine of x minus pi plus 1/2. Ah, they're both the same graph. Excellent. So we were correct. We are good to go. And you can check your answers even on quizzes and exams, okay? Plug it into Desmos, see if you have the equation of the graph that you want. All right, look away, because I'm going to write the next problem back down. All right, and I don't want any cheating. I should be able to copy paste it back in. So, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. All right, hopefully you were looking away. Hopefully you're still looking away, but I just did something that makes me really sad. Because I have this screen over here perfectly balanced so that you don't see any of this nonsense on the side. I just moved it. I guess it's not that big of a deal, right? I can just fix it right now. It's okay. So the question is, example 7 is do the same thing. but it's going to be a little different for example 7. Find any equation. So it's not going to tell you whether sine or cosine. For this graph. All right, so it's your choice whether you want sine or cosine. And I'm going to make this a little smaller. I'm going to give you some I'm going to change this, make it look a little clearer for you. Here's your graph now. Find the equation for this graph. You can use sine, you can use cosine, but we're going to use the same logic that we used in the last one. All right, so we're going to start by saying, okay, we know it's going to be of this form. Y equals A times, I don't know. Do you guys see this more as cosine or sine? Both answers are fine. I see this more as cosine. My eyes gravitate right here. Cosine normally starts at the top, and we're almost starting at the top, but we're shifted 1 unit to the right. So I would choose cosine, but it's up to you. A cosine of bx minus c plus d. And I've already kind of mentioned 1 unit to the right. We can write that down. The phase shift is 1 unit to the right. And the phase shift is c over b. So 1 equals c over b, but we can't actually solve for the phase shift until we know what b is. But again, cosine normally starts at the top when x is equal to 0, but we got shifted right 1 unit. Or you could say we got shifted left 5 units. Or you could say we got shifted right 7 units. They're all correct. All right. Let's do the midline. Where is the middle of this graph? The maximum is 1. The minimum is -5. That's a distance of 6. Half that distance is 3. The amplitude has to be 3, which means the midline has to be -2. -2 is the middle of this graph. -2 is the middle, and then we go up 3 and down 3. Midline is y equals -2, right? Yeah. And then the amplitude, we already said that, right? Is 3. We're getting all sorts of information. Let's kind of fill in what we have. Amplitude is 3. We're using cosine. Don't know the period or phase shift yet. And the midline is -2. Let's look at the period next. Period has to do with that b value. Period is how long it takes to repeat. So we could look at all these top points. How far does it go between each of these top points? Distance of 6. Or we could look at all of the bottom ones, right? It's also a distance of 6. So the period is 6. So we have to, again, say a period is 2 pi. We can, again, assume we're not doing anything fancy. We can assume b is positive. So period is 6. It's 2 pi over b. And we just solve for b again. Another way you can do this is cross multiplying. 6 over 1. And then 1 times 2 pi, 6 times b. 6b is equal to 2 pi. Divide both sides by 6. b is 2 pi over 6. Just pi over 3. Our b value is pi over 3. And as soon as we know that b value is pi over 3, we can use that to find our phase shift. So 1 is equal to c divided by our b value of pi over 3. And we're going to have to solve this for c. One way to do that, right? We're dividing by pi over 3, so we can multiply both sides by pi over 3. Dividing by pi over 3, multiplying by pi over 3 is going to cancel. C is actually also pi over 3. And this is one way of expressing our answer. There's a couple of other ways of doing this and a couple of other ways of getting our answer, but I don't want to go too into it now. That ends the video. Good luck. You can check your answer on Desmos. I did just check my answer again. It is correct. We're good to go. Let me know if you have any questions.